The emergency beacon screamed across 17 star systems simultaneously, and Commander Vex'thor of the Kaldranian Supremacy watched his communications officer's face turn 3 different shades of purple, which was never a good sign. "Sir, you need to see this," Lieutenant Cora said, her voice cracking like thin ice over a frozen lake. Vex'thor straightened his ceremonial armor, each plate representing a conquered world, 53 in total. He had earned every single one through strategic brilliance and overwhelming firepower. The Kaldranians had dominated this sector of the galaxy for millennia, and nothing, absolutely nothing, surprised him anymore. Or so he thought. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the transmission from the diplomatic vessel Eternal Radiance. Ambassador Threll's face filled the screen, and Vex'thor noticed immediately that 2 of his subordinates' 4 eyes were twitching uncontrollably. Behind him, the bridge of his ship appeared to be in complete disarray. "Commander," Threll began, his voice wavering, "I must report a diplomatic incident." Vex'thor leaned forward. "Speak clearly, Ambassador. What happened?" "We delivered the ultimatum of submission to the human homeworld, as ordered. The standard protocol, 72 hours to surrender or face complete annihilation. We followed every procedure from the Manual of Conquest, edition 47, subsection 12.3. And?" Vex'thor prompted, growing impatient. Threll's face contorted in what might have been confusion, or possibly indigestion. "They laughed at us, sir." The bridge fell silent. Even the perpetual humming of the ship's engines seemed to pause in disbelief. "They what?" "Laughed, Commander. The human leader, a female named Director Elena Voss, actually laughed, all for approximately 47 seconds. Then she said, and I quote, 'You picked the wrong century, buddy.'" Vex'thor felt his primary heart skip a beat. In 800 years of military service, across 93 campaigns, no species had ever laughed at a Kaldranian ultimatum. Fear, yes. Desperation, certainly. Futile defiance, occasionally. But laughter? Perhaps they misunderstood the translation? Suggested Cora, hopefully. "Negative," Threll replied, his voice taking on an edge of hysteria. The human director then proceeded to explain in perfect Kaldranian formal dialect exactly why our ultimatum was, and again I quote, "adorably outdated and tragically misinformed." "Rebel," the seller replied, his voice taking on an edge of hysteria. The human director then proceeded to explain in perfect Kaldranian formal dialect exactly why our ultimatum was, and again I quote, "adorably outdated and tragically misinformed." Vex'thor accessed his tactical database, pulling up everything the Kaldranian intelligence network had gathered on humanity. The information was sparse, which was itself unusual. Humans had been spacefaring for only 800 years, a mere blink in galactic terms. They had colonized exactly 47 star systems, no major conflicts with neighboring species, no expansionist tendencies. They seemed content to explore, trade, and generally mind their own business. In other words, perfect targets. "Continue your report, Ambassador," Vex'thor ordered. Hraum took a deep breath, all 4 of his lungs working overtime. Director Voss then asked if we were aware that humanity had been at peace for 1,042 years. She seemed quite proud of this fact. "A millennium of peace," Vex'thor mused. "That explains their softness. They have forgotten the ways of war." "That is what I assumed as well, Commander. However, when I pointed this out, suggesting it made them easy prey, Director Voss laughed even harder. She said, and this is the part that troubles me most, "We did not forget war. We perfected it. Then we got bored and put it away." A chill ran down Vex'thor's spine, which was anatomically impressive given that his species had 3 spines. "She is bluffing," he said, though he was not entirely sure he believed it. "There is more, sir. The human director offered us a counter-proposal. She said we had 72 hours to withdraw our fleet, issue a formal apology, and provide compensation for what she called wasting her afternoon. Failure to comply would result in, her exact words, a demonstration of why humanity does not play war games anymore." The bridge erupted in a mixture of outraged clicks, hisses, and the Kaldranian equivalent of incredulous laughter. Junior officers scrambled to their stations, ready to compute firing solutions. This insult could not stand. But Vex'thor held up one clawed hand for silence. Something about this situation felt wrong, deeply wrong. In his experience, species did not bluff when facing a fleet of 200 warships, each capable of glassing a planet. They either surrendered immediately or launched desperate futile attacks. They did not laugh. They did not offer counter-ultimatums. They certainly did not speak of putting war away like some forgotten toy. Ambassador Threll, did you observe any military preparations on the human worlds? None, Commander. Their defense stations are active but operating at minimal power. No fleet mobilization. No planetary shields at full capacity. They are either supremely confident or supremely stupid. Vex'thor pulled up the star charts, examining human space with fresh eyes. Something nagged at his tactical mind, a detail he had overlooked. Then he saw it. Every single human colony was positioned at a strategically perfect location, not for defense, but for something else entirely. The placement was too precise to be accidental. Cora, run a historical analysis. I want to know everything about humanity's last war. His communications officer's fingers flew across her console. Moments later, her face went pale, which was quite a feat for someone with naturally violet skin. Sir, the records are extensive. The last human conflict was the Unification War, concluded exactly 1,042 years ago. Duration of conflict, 3 years. Casualties, 4.7 billion human deaths. The bridge went silent again. That is impossible, Vex'thor said quietly. They only had one inhabited planet at that time. That would mean nearly half their total population, sir. They fought each other with a ferocity that makes the Burning Crusades look like a minor disagreement. The weapons they deployed, Commander? They cracked tectonic plates for tactical advantages. They poisoned entire continents. They created diseases specifically designed to target genetic markers. One faction apparently dropped an asteroid on their own capital city rather than let it fall to the enemy. Vex'thor felt his secondary heart begin to race. And after this war? Complete and total peace. Every nation unified under a single government, all weapons of mass destruction, dismantled or placed in permanent storage. They redirected their entire military-industrial complex towards space exploration and scientific research. They redirected their entire military-industrial complex towards space exploration and scientific research. It is as if they collectively decided to never fight again. Or Lieutenant Cora said slowly, they decided they had gotten too good at it. The realization hit Vex'thor like a plasma bolt to the chest. A species that had nearly destroyed itself through warfare, that had demonstrated the capacity and willingness to sacrifice billions in pursuit of victory, had chosen peace. Not because they were weak, but because they had become too dangerous to themselves. And now the Kaldranians had just threatened to drag them back into that darkness. Get me everything we have on human military technology, Vex'thor ordered. Current and historical. Current and historical. The data streams began flooding his screens. At first glance, human current military assets looked pathetically inadequate. Small defense fleets, basic energy weapons, standard kinetic barriers. Nothing that could threaten a Kaldranian battle group. Then Cora pulled up the historical archives from the Unification War and Vex'thor's blood ran cold. Kinetic bombardment systems that could accelerate projectiles to 0.9 light speed. Nano-machine swarms that could disassemble matter at the molecular level. Nano-machine swarms that could disassemble matter at the molecular level. Artificial intelligence weapons that had been so effective, so terrifyingly efficient at killing, that humanity had banned them entirely and purged every trace of their existence from their networks. Biological agents that could be programmed to target specific DNA sequences. Fusion devices small enough to fit in a briefcase but powerful enough to level a city. And that was 800 years ago. What had they developed since then and simply chosen not to use? Commander, Threll's voice came through the comm again, this time barely above a whisper. I am sending you another transmission. It just arrived from Director Voss. She said it was, quote, a little something to help you make an informed decision. The hologram shifted to show a simple star map. It displayed Kaldranian space, all 17 systems under their control. Except something was wrong. There were new markers scattered throughout their territory, dozens of them, pulsing with a soft blue light. What am I looking at? Vex'thor demanded. Unknown objects, sir, Cora reported, her voice shaking. They appeared simultaneously across all our systems exactly 3 minutes ago. Our sensors cannot get a clear reading on them. They are too small, too quiet. But sir, they are positioned near every major population center, every military installation, every industrial hub in Kaldranian space. That is impossible, Vex'thor said. We would have detected ships entering our territory. Unless they were already there, Cora whispered. Sir, if these objects have been in position for months, years even, just waiting dormant until activated. A new message appeared on Vex'thor's screen. Text only, in flawless Kaldranian. These are not weapons. They are bookmarks. Consider them a demonstration of reach, not intent. You have 71 hours remaining. Choose wisely. Humanity has enjoyed our peace, and we would very much like to keep it that way. But if you insist on war, we will remind you why we stopped playing. Regards, Director Elena Voss. P.S. The coffee on your homeworld is apparently excellent. The infiltration team that has been sampling it for the past 6 months highly recommends the dark roast. Vex'thor stood frozen, his mind racing through tactical scenarios and finding no good options. If humans had infiltration teams that had been operating in Kaldranian space for months without detection, if they had positioned assets throughout his empire without triggering a single alarm, then humanity's 1,000-year peace was not a sign of weakness. It was a mercy they had granted to the rest of the galaxy. Sir, Lieutenant Cora said carefully. What are your orders? Vex'thor looked at the star map, at the blue markers scattered like seeds across his empire, at the casualty reports from a war fought by humans against themselves with such savage efficiency that they had voluntarily abandoned warfare entirely rather than risk doing it again. Then he looked at his fleet of 200 warships, each one designed to inspire terror and deliver overwhelming destruction, and realized with perfect clarity that they were not predators approaching prey. They were prey that had wandered into the den of a sleeping apex predator. And like complete idiots, they had poked it with a stick. The question now was whether that predator would simply roll over and go back to sleep, or whether the Kaldranians had just made the single worst strategic blunder in galactic history. 71 hours to find out. Vex'thor suspected it was going to be a very long 3 days. 68 hours remained on the countdown, when Fleet Admiral Kress'dal arrived at Vex'thor's flagship, and he was not happy. Then again, Kress'dal was never happy. The Admiral had spent 400 years cultivating an image of perpetual disappointment with the universe, and today seemed to be his masterpiece of displeasure. On the brakes, light to me, Commander Vex'thor. Why we have not already begun orbital bombardment, Kress'dal growled, his massive frame filling the doorway to the command center. I received a rather disturbing report that you are considering withdrawal based on a few parlor tricks and empty threats. Vex'thor kept his expression neutral, though internally he was calculating how many different ways this conversation could end his career. Admiral. With respect, I do not believe these are empty threats. The humans have demonstrated capabilities that our intelligence completely failed to identify. They put some satellites in our space. So what? Kress'dal waved a dismissive claw. We have dealt with stealth technology before. We simply execute the standard response. Total overwhelming force before they can activate whatever clever little devices they planted. And if those devices are antimatter charges positioned next to our population centers? Kress'dal's eyes narrowed.
You think they would commit such an atrocity, out-targeting civilians?
Admiral, I think they already fought a war where they did exactly that to themselves. 4.7 billion dead. That is not a species that fights with restraint. The Admiral moved to the tactical display, studying the blue markers scattered across Kaldranian space. Then we strike first, hard and fast. We glass their homeworld before they can transmit the activation codes. Problem solved. Except we have no idea where those activation codes are, Lieutenant Cora interjected nervously. For all we know, the codes activate automatically if they do not receive regular check-in signals from human space, or if Earth stops transmitting, or if any one of 100 other conditions are met. They have had months, possibly years, to set this up. They will have contingencies. Kress'dal snorted. You are jumping at shadows. This is exactly what they want. Fear and hesitation. Classic psychological warfare. I expected better from the officer corps. A notification chimed on Vex'thor's console. Another transmission from the humans.
He almost did not want to open it.
Put it through, Kress'dal ordered. The hologram resolved into the image of Director Elena Voss, sitting in what appeared to be a comfortable office with a cup of the previously mentioned coffee steaming on her desk. She looked relaxed, almost bored. Hello again, she said pleasantly. I see you brought reinforcements. Fleet Admiral Kress'dal, correct? Your reputation precedes you. 112 conquered worlds. Very impressive. Must have been quite satisfying. Kress'dal stepped forward, his imposing figure now dominating the transmission pickup. Human. You have made threats against the Kaldranian Supremacy. This is a mistake that will cost your species everything. Elena took a sip of her coffee, made a small approving sound, then set the cup down carefully. Admiral, I have not made any threats. I have made observations and offered a mutually beneficial resolution to this situation. There is a difference. You have violated our territorial sovereignty and positioned weapons throughout our space. Them said they were not weapons, they are bookmarks. Insurance policies if you prefer. Think of them as a guarantee of good behavior on both sides. Remove them immediately or face the consequences. Elena's expression did not change, but something in her eyes shifted. Vex'thor recognized it instantly. It was the look of someone running calculations, evaluating options, preparing contingencies. It was the look of a predator deciding whether prey was worth the effort of hunting. Admiral Kress'dal, let me tell you a story, Elena said, leaning back in her chair. About 860 years ago, there was a human military researcher named Dr. Marcus Holt. Brilliant man. Absolutely brilliant. He developed something called the Cascade Protocol. Are you familiar with it? Both Vex'thor and Kress'dal remained silent. Of course you are not. We erased it from history. Very thoroughly. But I happen to have access to the restricted archives, perks of the job and all that. The Cascade Protocol was a nightmare made real, a self-replicating nanomachine system that could convert any matter into more copies of itself, spreading exponentially. Dr. Holt estimated that a single deployment could convert an entire planet's mass into gray goo in approximately 72 hours. Coincidentally, the same time limit we gave you. Funny how that works. Kress'dal's face twitched. That technology is theoretical. No species has successfully weaponized self-replicating nanotechnology without it turning on its creators. Correct, Elena agreed. Dr. Holt's first test got loose in a research facility, consumed the entire structure, 400 researchers, and was spreading into the surrounding city before they managed to activate the kill switch. The incident was classified, the technology banned, and Dr. Holt spent the rest of his life trying to make amends for creating something so horrific. Why are you telling us this? Vex'thor asked quietly. Because Dr. Holt was not the only one who had terrible ideas. During the Unification War, humanity's brightest minds were all competing to create the ultimate weapon, and some of them succeeded. We have technologies locked away that we pray we never have to use again, not because they do not work, but because they work too well. Elena stood up, walking to a window that showed Earth rotating peacefully below. After the war ended, after we counted our dead and surveyed the ruins of what we had done to ourselves, humanity made a choice. We decided that we were too good at killing, so we stopped. We took every weapon of mass destruction, every planet killer, every nightmare device, and we locked them away. Then we spent 1,000 years learning to be better. She turned back to face the camera.
But make no mistake, Admiral.
Just because we put our swords away does not mean we forgot how to use them. And just because we chose peace does not mean we are incapable of war. It simply means we understand the cost better than most. Kress'dal slammed his fist on the console. More threats wrapped in history lessons. You think we are impressed by stories? By what-ifs and maybes? The Kaldranian Supremacy has crushed stronger species than yours. Have you though? Elena asked, her voice suddenly sharp. Let me ask you something, Admiral. When was the last time you fought someone who could actually fight back? The question hung in the air like a plasma charge. Your conquest record is impressive, Elena continued. 112 worlds, but I pulled the reports. Every single one of those worlds was either pre-industrial or early space age. You have never fought a peer-level opponent. You have been picking on the weak for so long, you have forgotten what real war looks like. Vex'thor felt something click into place in his mind. She was right. The Kaldranian expansion had been built on overwhelming technological superiority. They found developing species and crushed them before they could mount effective resistance.
It was efficient. It was logical.
It was also completely inadequate preparation for fighting an opponent who actually knew what they were doing. We will not be intimidated by empty words, Kress'dal declared, but Vex'thor noticed a slight tremor in his superior's voice. Elena smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Empty words. All right, let me show you something concrete. Lieutenant Voss, if you would. A second figure appeared in the transmission, a younger woman in a military uniform. She saluted crisply. Director initiating demonstration protocol Gamma. Wait, Vex'thor said urgently. What are you doing? Proving a point, Elena replied. Lieutenant, proceed with the demonstration. Target the uninhabited system at coordinates 7, 7, 3 Mark 4, 2 Mark 18. Authorization code, Thunderstorm, midnight. Confirmed, Director. Firing solution computed. Weapon discharge in 3, 2, 1, Mark. Nothing happened. At least nothing that Vex'thor could see from his position. But Lieutenant Cora gasped, her eyes locked on her sensor display. Commander, I am reading a massive energy spike from human space. Something just launched. Velocity is? No, that cannot be right. It is accelerating past light speed. How is that possible? Alcubierre configuration, Elena said casually. We cracked faster than light kinetics about 600 years ago. Never deployed them because, well, they are absolutely ridiculous overkill for anything short of planetary extinction events. But I thought a demonstration might be useful. The sensor reading spiked again. Vex'thor pulled up the view of the target system, or dead collection of asteroids and lifeless rocks, 8 light-years away. 8 light-years. The projectile covered the distance in 4 minutes. When it hit the largest asteroid in the system, the result was visible even from their position. The asteroid, roughly the size of Kaldrania's smaller moon, simply ceased to exist. The energy release was equivalent to a small supernova, and the shockwave scattered the rest of the system like leaves in a hurricane. Sweet merciful void, Cora whispered. That was one projectile, Elena said, her voice perfectly calm. We have 800 more in the magazine, and that is just the kinetic artillery. Would you like me to demonstrate the exotic matter warheads? Or perhaps the quantum disruptor torpedoes? Or we could show you the stellar igniters. Those are particularly impressive, though they do take a few hours to properly destabilize a star. Kress'dal had gone very quiet. His earlier bluster had evaporated like morning dew under a fusion torch. You are wondering why we have not used these weapons, ma'am, Elena continued. Why we did not just destroy your fleet the moment you entered our space. The answer is simple. We do not want to. War is easy. Peace is hard. We chose the hard path, and we would very much like to stay on it. She leaned forward, her expression intense. But if you force our hand, if you give us no choice, then we will do what we have always done when threatened with extinction. We will unleash hell itself, and we will not stop until the threat is eliminated. Completely, permanently, thoroughly. Your entire empire spans 17 star systems, Lieutenant Voss added. We can reach all of them in under an hour. We can sterilize all of them in under a day. And if we determine that your species represents an ongoing threat, we can ensure that no trace of Kaldranian civilization remains anywhere in this galaxy. Elena held up a hand. But we really do not want to do that. Mass extinction is so last millennium. So here is what is going to happen. You are going to withdraw your fleet. You are going to issue a formal apology. You are going to compensate us for the time and resources we spent setting up this little insurance policy throughout your space. And then we are all going to go back to our respective corners of the galaxy and pretend this unfortunate misunderstanding never happened. And if we refuse? Kress'dal asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Then I activate the devices scattered throughout your space. They are not bombs, by the way. They are broadcast nodes. They will transmit detailed technical specifications for every weapon humanity developed during the Unification War to every species within 100 light-years of your territory, including the ones you have recently conquered or are planning to conquer next. Vex'thor felt his world tilt on its axis. You would not. That would destabilize the entire sector. True, Elena agreed. It would be chaos for a century or two, but you know what would not survive that chaos? Your empire. Because suddenly all those developing species you prey on would have access to weapons that could actually hurt you. Level the playing field, so to speak. That is madness, Kress'dal said. That is mutually assured destruction. Elena corrected. An old human concept. If we cannot have peace, nobody can. Scorched earth policy on a galactic scale. We spent 1,000 years climbing out of the ashes of the last time we did this. We learned our lesson, but if you need to learn yours the hard way, we are prepared to be excellent teachers. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Vex'thor looked at Admiral Kress'dal, watching as centuries of military confidence crumbled like ancient stone. The Admiral's face cycled through several expressions before settling on something that might have been resignation or possibly existential dread. Commander Vex'thor, Kress'dal said slowly. Prepare the fleet for withdrawal.
Immediately.
Sir? You were right. We poked a sleeping predator, and it turns out that predator was sleeping by choice, not necessity. The Admiral moved toward the door, then paused. Draft a formal apology to the humans. Make it appropriately humble, and someone find out what compensation they are demanding. After Kress'dal left, Lieutenant Cora turned to Vex'thor. Sir, do you think they were bluffing about any of it? Vex'thor thought about the asteroid that no longer existed, about the devices scattered throughout Kaldranian space, about a species that had nearly destroyed itself and then chose to walk away from the tools of that destruction. No, Lieutenant, I do not think they were bluffing. I think we just learned a very important lesson about the difference between species that fight because they must, and species that choose not to fight because they can. What difference is that, sir? The ones who choose not to fight are infinitely more dangerous, because they have nothing to prove. They already know they can win. 3 hours later, the Kaldranian fleet began its withdrawal from human space. The official record would state it as a diplomatic resolution. The unofficial truth was that the Kaldranian Supremacy had just survived an encounter with something they had never faced before. A species that had mastered war so completely that peace became the only logical option. Director Elena Voss watched the Kaldranian ships depart on her office display, sipping her coffee as the last vessel winked out to faster-than-light travel. Well handled, Director, Lieutenant Voss said. Though I have to ask, would we really have shared the restricted weapons data with the rest of the sector? Elena was quiet for a moment.
The
beautiful thing about mutually assured destruction, Lieutenant, is that it only works if everyone believes you are willing to push the button. The truth is irrelevant. The threat is everything. So we were bluffing? I did not say that. Elena smiled slightly. The trick is to never let them know which parts are real and which parts are theater. Keeps everyone honest. She turned back to her work, to the peaceful administration of humanity's 47 colonies, to the endless tasks of maintaining a civilization that had chosen cooperation over conquest. The 1,000-year peace would continue. Because sometimes the greatest show of strength was choosing not to use it at all. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, 800 kinetic artillery shells returned to their magazines, quantum disruptor torpedoes went back into storage, and stellar igniters powered down into dormant mode. Just in case. Because humanity had learned one final lesson from their terrible war. The peace was always preferable. But preparedness was eternal.